In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, Earth stood as a beacon of peace. For centuries, humans had been known throughout the galaxy as the diplomats, the mediators, the ones who sought harmony above all else. This reputation, while admirable, had also branded them as weak in the eyes of more aggressive species. On a crisp autumn morning, Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the window of her office at the United Earth Space Agency. Her eyes swept over the bustling city below, a testament to human ingenuity and cooperation. Sleek buildings reached for the sky, their solar panels glinting in the sunlight. People of all races and backgrounds moved about their day, a picture of unity that had taken centuries to achieve. Sarah sighed, her thoughts drifting to the latest reports from the Galactic Council. Once again, Earth's application for a seat had been denied. The reason? Lack of significant military contribution to galactic security. A knock on her door interrupted her musings. "Come in," she called out, turning away from the window. Captain James Morrison, a tall man with a weather-beaten face, entered the room. His uniform, adorned with medals from peacekeeping missions, seemed at odds with the worried expression he wore. "Dr. Chen, we've received a transmission from the Andromeda outpost," he said, his voice grave. "It's not good news." Sarah's heart sank. The Andromeda outpost was Earth's farthest colony, a symbol of human perseverance and technological advancement. "What happened, Captain?" "The Zarkan Empire has launched an attack on the neighboring system," Morrison replied, his fists clenching at his sides. "They're demanding that we evacuate our outpost immediately." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the galaxy settle on her shoulders. The Zarkan were known for their aggressive expansion, but they had never dared to come this close to Earth-controlled space before. "Have they given a reason?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. Morrison's laugh was bitter. "The same old story, Doctor. They claim we're too weak to defend the sector properly, that our presence is a liability." Sarah walked to her desk, her mind racing. On the wall behind her, a large screen displayed a map of known space. Earth and its colonies were represented by a small cluster of blue dots, dwarfed by the vast red expanse of the Zarkan Empire. "We can't abandon the outpost," she said firmly. "It's not just about the resources or the strategic position. It's about showing the galaxy that we won't be bullied." Morrison nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "I couldn't agree more, Doctor. But the question is, how do we stand up to them without starting a war we can't win?" Sarah turned back to the window, her gaze now focused on the distant sky. Somewhere out there, brave men and women were facing an impossible choice: stand their ground and risk annihilation, or retreat and prove the galaxy right about human weakness. "We do what we've always done, Captain," she said softly. "We find a way to turn our perceived weakness into strength." She walked to a shelf filled with books, real paper books, a rarity in this digital age. Her fingers trailed over the spines until they found what she was looking for. She pulled out a thick volume titled Earth's Military History. "The galaxy sees us as weak because we choose peace," Sarah said, flipping through the pages. "But they forget that we've faced our own share of wars and conflicts. We've overcome them not just through force, but through innovation, adaptability, and an unbreakable spirit." Morrison stepped closer, intrigued. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. "I'm suggesting we remind the galaxy, and ourselves, of who we really are. We're not just diplomats and peacekeepers. We're survivors, innovators, and when pushed to our limits, we're fighters." She closed the book with a snap. "Call an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. It's time we showed the Zarkan and the rest of the galaxy what happens when humanity's back is against the wall." As Morrison hurried out to make the arrangements, Sarah turned back to the window. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow, she knew, would mark the beginning of a new era for humanity. Little did she know, It would also mark the beginning of a conflict that would shatter the galaxy's perception of human weakness forever. The early morning calm was shattered by the wail of sirens. Dr. Sarah Chen jolted awake, her heart pounding. She fumbled for her communicator, already knowing what she would hear. "Dr. Chen, report to headquarters immediately." Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the device. "It's happening." Sarah dressed quickly, her mind racing. As she stepped outside, the streets were in chaos. People ran in all directions, their faces masks of fear and confusion. Above, the sky was filled with strange, dark shapes, alien ships, their sleek designs unlike anything humans had ever built. At the United Earth Space Agency headquarters, the mood was grim. Sarah burst into the control room, where Captain Morrison stood before a large screen displaying a map of Earth. Red dots blinked all over the globe, indicating attack sites. "The Zarkan?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Morrison nodded grimly. "They struck without warning. Multiple cities hit simultaneously. They're not just after the Andromeda outpost anymore. They want Earth." Sarah's mind flashed back to their conversation just days ago. They had prepared for conflict, but not on this scale. Not so soon. "What about our defenses?" she asked. A young lieutenant spoke up, his voice shaking. "Our planetary shield is holding, but it's weakening fast. We never designed it to withstand this level of firepower." Sarah watched in horror as another series of red dots appeared on the map. Each one represented thousands, maybe millions of lives in danger. "They think we're weak," she muttered, anger rising in her chest. "They think we'll just roll over and surrender." Morrison's face hardened. "Then let's prove them wrong." Over the next few hours, Sarah and the team worked tirelessly to coordinate Earth's defenses. They'd redirected satellites to disrupt the Zarkan communication systems, mobilized their limited fleet of starships, and evacuated as many civilians as possible from the hardest-hit areas. But it wasn't enough. By nightfall, the planetary shield had fallen. Zarkan ground troops began to land, their advanced weaponry cutting through Earth's military like paper. In the control room, now lit only by emergency power, Sarah watched the reports flood in. New York underwater, Tokyo in flames, the Great Wall of China, which had stood for thousands of years, reduced to rubble in minutes. "Dr. Chen," a voice called out. It was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's leading xenobiologist. "I've been analyzing the data from our encounters with the Zarkan troops. There's something odd about their behavior." Sarah looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Odd how?" Yuki pulled up a series of video feeds on the main screen. They showed Zarkan soldiers in various locations around the world. "Look at their movements," she said. "They're efficient, yes, but also predictable, almost robotic." Sarah studied the footage, her scientific mind kicking into gear despite the chaos around her. Yuki was right. There was a pattern to the aliens' actions, a lack of adaptability that seemed at odds with their advanced technology. "They're not adapting to our counterattacks," Sarah realized aloud. "They're just powering through with brute force." A plan began to form in her mind. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might be their only chance. "Captain Morrison," she called out, "I need you to gather every hacker, every programmer we've got, and get me all the data we have on Zarkan technology." Morrison looked at her quizzically. "What are you thinking, Doctor?" Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. "The Zarkan think they know everything about us. They see our preference for peace as weakness, but they've forgotten something crucial about humanity." She pointed to the screens showing the devastation around the world. "We're at our most creative, our most innovative, when our backs are against the wall. And right now, our backs are about as far against the wall as they can get." She turned to face the room, her voice rising with conviction. "The Zarkan may have superior firepower, but we have something they don't. The ability to adapt, to think outside the box. And we're going to use that to hit them where they least expect it." As the team gathered around her, Ready to hear her plan, Sarah allowed herself a small, grim smile. The Zarkan had come expecting an easy victory over a weak, peace-loving species. They were about to learn just how dangerous humanity could be when pushed too far. The days that followed the initial Zarkan attack were the darkest in human history. Dr. Sarah Chen watched helplessly as city after city fell to the alien invaders. The plan she had formulated in those first chaotic hours seemed increasingly futile in the face of such overwhelming force. From the underground bunker that now served as Earth's last command center, Sarah coordinated what remained of humanity's defenses. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of computer screens and emergency lighting. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of fear. "Report," she demanded, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Captain Morrison stepped forward, his once pristine uniform now torn and stained. "It's not good, Doctor," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We've lost contact with our forces in Europe and Asia. Africa is holding on, but barely. The Americas are our last major stronghold." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to push back the wave of despair that threatened to overwhelm her. When she opened them again, her gaze fell on a young lieutenant whose name she couldn't remember. The girl couldn't have been more than 20, yet her eyes held the weariness of someone who had lived 1,000 years. "What about our hacking efforts?" Sarah asked, clinging to the last shred of hope. The lieutenant shook her head. "We've made some progress in understanding their communication systems, but every time we think we've broken through, they adapt. It's like they're learning from our attempts." This news hit Sarah like a physical blow. Their one advantage, human creativity and adaptability, seemed to be failing them. For the first time since the invasion began, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that they might lose this war. Just then, an alarm blared through the bunker. Red lights flashed, and panic spread across the faces of the staff. "They found us," Morrison said, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "The Zarkan have located the command center." Sarah's mind raced. They couldn't lose this bunker. It was more than just a command center. It housed the last remnants of human knowledge, the collective wisdom of a species facing extinction. "Initiate Protocol Omega," she ordered, her voice steady, despite the fear gripping her heart. Morrison looked at her in shock. "But Doctor, that would mean—" "I know what it means," Sarah cut him off. "Do it. Now." As Morrison rushed to carry out her orders, Sarah turned to address the room. "Listen to me, all of you," she shouted over the din of the alarms. "What we're about to do, it's not a retreat. It's not surrender. It's a tactical withdrawal to regroup and come back stronger." She paused, looking each person in the eye. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We've stared into the abyss and pulled ourselves back. And we'll do it again, because that's who we are. We don't give up. We adapt. We survive." The bunker shook as the first Zarkan weapons struck the surface above them. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "Now go," Sarah ordered, "to your assigned evacuation points. Carry with you not just our data, but our hope, our determination, our humanity." As the staff rushed to evacuate, Sarah remained at her station, coordinating the withdrawal. She watched as the precious servers containing humanity's knowledge were disconnected and carried away. She monitored the progress of the evacuation ships, ensuring each one launched safely. Only when the last ship was away did Sarah finally head for her own escape pod. As she strapped herself in, she allowed herself one last look at the monitor showing the surface of Earth. The planet that had been humanity's cradle for millennia was now a battleground, large swathes of it burning under Zarkan assault. The escape pod launched, streaking away from the dying world. As Earth receded in the viewport, Sarah felt a mix of emotions: grief for what was lost, fear for what was to come, but also a steely determination. This wasn't the end, she told herself. It was just the beginning of humanity's greatest test, and somehow, someway, they would pass it. As her pod joined the fleet of evacuees heading for the secret lunar base, Sarah began to plan. The Zarkan thought they had won. They thought humanity was beaten. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The lunar base, hidden beneath the moon's cratered surface, buzzed with activity. It had been 3 months since the fall of Earth, and the remnants of humanity had transformed this scientific outpost into their last stronghold. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the center of the main control room, surrounded by a team of Earth's brightest minds. The weight of leadership had etched new lines on her face, but her eyes burned with undiminished determination. "What do we know about the Zarkan that we didn't know before?" she asked, her gaze sweeping across the room. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the xenobiologist, stepped forward. "We've been analyzing the data from our encounters on Earth," she said, pulling up a holographic display. "The Zarkan's behavior patterns are remarkably consistent, almost programmed." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Are you suggesting they're not biological?" Yuki shook her head. "No, they're definitely organic, but their responses lack the variability we'd expect from a species with free will. It's as if they're following a very complex, but ultimately limited, set of instructions." This information sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. If their responses are programmed, then they can be predicted. And if they can be predicted, they can be outsmarted, finished Captain Morrison, a grim smile on his face. Sarah nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to dig deeper. I want every scrap of information we have on the Zarkan. Their technology, their biology, their culture, everything." The team sprang into action, poring over data, running simulations, and debating theories. Days turned into weeks as they worked tirelessly, fueled by the hope that they might find a weakness in their seemingly invincible enemy. It was Dr. Aidan Foster, a cultural anthropologist, who made the breakthrough. "I think I've found something," he announced one day, his voice trembling with excitement. The team gathered around as Aidan pulled up a series of images on the main screen. They showed various Zarkan artifacts and structures, all featuring intricate, repeating patterns. "At first, I thought these were just decorative," Aidan explained. "But look at this." He zoomed in on one of the patterns, revealing that it was made up of complex mathematical equations. "It's a language," Sarah breathed, her eyes widening in realization. Aidan nodded eagerly. "Not just a language, but the foundation of their entire society. The Zarkan don't communicate like we do. They don't have art or music as we understand it. Everything in their culture is based on mathematical precision and logic. That explains their lack of adaptability," Yuki chimed in. "They're not programmed in the artificial intelligence sense, but their entire way of thinking is constrained by this mathematical framework." Sarah's mind was whirling with the implications. "So if we can understand this language, we can predict their strategies," Morrison said. "Maybe even communicate with them on their level." "Better than that," Sarah said, a plan already forming in her mind. "We can introduce chaos into their perfect mathematical world." She turned to the team, her voice rising with excitement. "Don't you see? This is why they saw us as weak. Our emotions, our creativity, our ability to act illogically. These are alien concepts to them. They can't predict or understand them. And that's our weapon," Yuki concluded, her eyes shining with newfound hope. Sarah nodded, feeling for the first time since the invasion that they had a real chance. "Aidan, I want you to lead a team in deciphering this mathematical language. Yuki, work with him to understand how it relates to their biology and behavior." She turned to Morrison. "Captain, start thinking about how we can use this knowledge tactically. I want strategies that will confuse and disorient the Zarkan." As the team dispersed, energized by this new direction, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection. The path ahead was still long and dangerous, but they had found a glimmer of light in the darkness. Humanity's greatest strengths, creativity, emotion, the ability to think outside the box, had been seen as weaknesses by the Zarkan. Now, these very traits would become the key to humanity's survival. Sarah looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, The Zarkan were waiting, believing they had all but won. They had no idea what was coming. The turning point had arrived, and humanity was ready to fight back. The lunar base hummed with a new energy. Months of preparation had led to this moment. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display of the solar system, her eyes fixed on the blue marble that was once home. Earth, now under Zarkan control, loomed large in her vision and larger still in her heart. "Are we ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Captain Morrison nodded, his face a mask of determination. "As ready as we'll ever be, Doctor. Operation Chaos is green across the board." Sarah took a deep breath, then turned to address the room full of humanity's last hope. Scientists, soldiers, and civilians alike waited with bated breath for her words. "Today," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the base via the comm system, "we strike back. Not with brute force, but with the very things the Zarkan dismissed as our weaknesses. Our creativity, our unpredictability, our humanity." She gestured to Dr. Aiden Foster, who stepped forward with a device in his hand. It looked like a simple tablet, but Sarah knew it held the key to their counterattack. "Dr. Foster and his team have created what we're calling the Chaos Engine," Sarah explained. "It generates sequences of illogical, emotionally charged commands in the Zarkan's mathematical language. To us, it might look like nonsense. To them, it will be a virus of irrationality." Morrison took over, pulling up tactical displays. "We've retrofitted our remaining ships with Chaos Engine transmitters. The plan is to approach Zarkan strongholds on Earth and in near orbit, broadcasting these irrational messages directly into their command systems." Sarah nodded, then continued. "We expect this to cause confusion and disruption in their ranks. But that's just Phase 1. Phase 2 is where humanity truly shines." She pulled up images of various teams, each prepared for a specific mission. While the Zarkan are disoriented, these strike teams will launch simultaneous attacks across the globe. Each team has been given the freedom to approach their mission creatively, to think outside the box in ways the Zarkan can't predict or counter. The room buzzed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This plan flew in the face of conventional military strategy. But then again, nothing about this war had been conventional. "I won't lie to you," Sarah said, her voice softening. "This is risky. We're betting everything on the idea that our unpredictability, our ability to act illogically when needed, will overcome their superior technology and numbers." She paused, looking each person in the eye. "But I believe in us, in our resilience, our creativity, our unwavering spirit. The Zarkan think they've won, that we're beaten. Let's show them how wrong they are." A cheer went up from the crowd, a sound filled with hope and determination. Sarah felt a surge of pride. These people, faced with the near extinction of their species, hadn't given up. They had adapted, innovated, and prepared to fight back against all odds. As the teams dispersed to their stations, Sarah approached the command console. She placed her hand on the activation panel, pausing for just a moment. "For Earth," she said softly, then pressed down. Across the lunar base, ships roared to life. The first wave of the counterattack launched, streaking towards the blue planet that had once been home. On board each vessel, humans from all walks of life prepared for battle, armed not just with weapons, but with the full force of human ingenuity and spirit. From her position in the command center, Sarah watched the ships disappear into the blackness of space. She thought of all the times in human history when the odds had seemed insurmountable, when defeat had seemed certain. Yet somehow, humanity had always found a way to survive, to push back the darkness. "Good luck," she whispered to the departing ships. "And Godspeed." As the last ship vanished from view, Sarah turned back to her team. The counterattack had begun. Now all they could do was wait, hope, and prepare for whatever came next. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, but for the first time since the Zarkan invasion, the balance was shifting. Humanity was no longer prey. They were now the predators. The command center of the lunar base was eerily quiet. Dr. Sarah Chen stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the main screen displaying the progress of Operation Chaos. Hours had passed since the launch of their counterattack, and now the first reports were trickling in. Suddenly, a burst of static filled the room. Lunar Base, this is Strike Team Alpha. Do you copy? The voice was breathless, filled with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite place. We hear you, Alpha, Sarah responded, her heart racing. What's your status? There was a moment of silence. Then, we've done it. I repeat, we've done it. The Chaos Engine worked. The Zarkin, they're in disarray. A cheer erupted in the command center. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she quickly composed herself. This was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, more reports flooded in. Each strike team had a different story to tell, but they all shared one common thread: success. In New York, a team had used the confusion caused by the Chaos Engine to infiltrate a Zarkin command post. They'd reprogrammed the aliens' own defensive systems, turning them against their masters. In Tokyo, another team had employed a strategy inspired by human music. They'd created a cacophony of sounds that, while harmless to humans, had severely disoriented the mathematically minded Zarkin. Reports from Cairo spoke of a team using holographic technology to create illusions that defied logic, sending the alien invaders into a panic. As Sarah listened to each report, she felt a growing sense of awe. Humanity, when pushed to its limits, was displaying a level of creativity and adaptability that was truly extraordinary. Dr. Chen, Captain Morrison called out, his voice tight with excitement. You need to see this. He pulled up a global map on the main screen. It showed the positions of Zarkin forces, represented by red dots. As they watched, the red dots began to flicker and disappear, one by one. They're retreating, Sarah breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Morrison nodded, a grin spreading across his face. Not just retreating. Look. He zoomed in on several locations. The imagery showed Zarkin ships rising into the atmosphere, but their movements were erratic, uncoordinated. The Chaos Engine didn't just confuse them, Morrison explained. It's fundamentally disrupted their ability to function as a cohesive force. They can't coordinate, can't strategize. They're running scared. Sarah watched in amazement as more and more Zarkin ships fled Earth's atmosphere. It was a sight she had dreamed of, but never truly believed she'd see. Just then, Dr. Yuki Tanaka burst into the room, her eyes wide with excitement. Sarah, we've intercepted a transmission from the Zarkin fleet. I think it's a distress call. Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. The Zarkin, who had arrived on Earth as unstoppable conquerors, were now calling for help. As the reality of their success began to sink in, Sarah felt a mix of emotions wash over her. Joy at their victory, relief that humanity had survived, but also a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished. We did it, she said softly. Then louder, we did it. The command center erupted in cheers and embraces. People who had been strangers months ago now hugged each other like family, united by their shared struggle and triumph. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah's thoughts turned to the future. The Zarkin were retreating, but the war wasn't over. Earth was in ruins, its population decimated. The road to recovery would be long and difficult. But looking at the faces around her, seeing the determination and spirit that had brought them this far, Sarah knew that humanity was up to the challenge. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger. They had taken their perceived weaknesses and turned them into their greatest strengths. In that moment, Sarah realized a profound truth. Humanity's greatest power wasn't in its weapons or its technology. It was in its spirit, the unbreakable, adaptable, creative spirit that had allowed them to overcome impossible odds. As she watched the last of the Zarkin ships disappear from Earth's orbit, Sarah Chen smiled. Humanity had become an unstoppable force, and she couldn't wait to see what they would accomplish next. 5 years had passed since the day humanity drove the Zarkin from Earth. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the window of her office in the newly built United Galactic headquarters, gazing out at the bustling city below. The scars of war were still visible, but they were fading, overtaken by the signs of rapid progress and renewal. A gentle chime announced a visitor. Sarah turned to see Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, enter the room. His hair had grayed at the temples, but his eyes still held the same determination she remembered from their days in the lunar base. "It's time, Doctor," he said with a smile. "The delegation is ready." Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Today was a day she had once thought impossible. The day humanity would take its place on the Galactic Council. As they walked through the corridors of the headquarters, Sarah's mind wandered back to the years following the Zarkin retreat. The victory had been just the beginning. Rebuilding Earth had been a monumental task, but humanity had approached it with the same creativity and adaptability that had won them the war. They had also turned their attention to the stars. The Chaos Engine, originally a weapon, had been repurposed into a revolutionary communication device. It allowed humans to interact with other species on levels previously thought impossible, bridging gaps in language and culture that had long been barriers to galactic cooperation. Earth's first diplomatic missions had been met with skepticism. Many species still saw humans as the peace-loving weaklings the Zarkin had dismissed them as. But as news of their victory spread, attitudes began to change. Humanity's ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds had earned them respect. Their innovative approach to problem-solving had garnered interest, and their willingness to extend a hand of friendship, even after facing near extinction, had won them admiration. Sarah and Morrison entered the grand chamber where the Galactic Council was assembled. Representatives from 100 different species filled the room, their diverse forms a testament to the vastness and variety of life in the universe. At the center of the chamber stood the Galactic Mediator, a being of shimmering energy that served as the neutral arbiter of council proceedings. As Sarah approached, she felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Dr. Sarah Chen, the mediator's voice resonated in her mind. "You stand before us as the representative of humanity. Once your species was deemed too weak for a place on this council. Today we recognize not only your strength, but the unique perspective you bring to our assembly." The mediator paused, its energy pulsing gently. "Your victory over the Zarkin was impressive, but it is what you have done since then that has truly earned you this position. You have shown that there is strength in peace, power in creativity, and wisdom in embracing diversity. These are the qualities that will shape the future of our galaxy." Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong as she addressed the council. "We come here not as conquerors, but as collaborators. Our journey has taught us that true strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. We have learned that what others perceive as weaknesses can be our greatest strengths. And we have discovered that the most powerful force in the universe is not any weapon or technology, but the indomitable spirit of living beings working together towards a common goal." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We are honored to take our place among you, and we pledge to use our unique experiences and perspectives to help build a galaxy where all species can thrive, where diversity is celebrated, and where we face our challenges united." As applause filled the chamber, Sarah felt a sense of profound gratitude. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged not just survivors, but leaders. They had transformed their perceived weaknesses into the very qualities that would help shape a new galactic order. The mediator's voice rose once more. "Let it be recorded. On this day, humanity takes its place on the Galactic Council. May this mark the beginning of a new era of peace, innovation, and cooperation across the stars." As the ceremony continued, Sarah's thoughts turned to the future. The challenges ahead were many, but for the first time in galactic history, they would be faced by a truly united front. Humanity's greatest trial had become its greatest triumph, and now that triumph would light the way forward for all species. The age of human weakness was over. The age of galactic unity had begun.